6:12 on a Tuesday evening. Camille Ashford stood at the window of the 27th floor with a glass of water in her hand. KGW Live played on the television behind her. The reporter said, "The tenant is refusing to leave." The camera tilted up to a brass number plate 214 Southwest Alder. Camille turned. The glass stopped mid-air. On the screen, a man kept his hand on the shoulder of an 8-year-old girl. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He watched the deputy tape a notice to the door. She said to no one, "That address, that is my building." If a moment like this holds you one small screen, one wrong version of a man, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from, and we'll keep going. The morning had started the way most mornings did in the 4th-floor apartment at 214 Southwest Alder. Emmett Doyle rose at 5:40, ground coffee by hand, and folded a wool sweater over the chair for his daughter. Hazel came out at 6:15 with the flower book under one arm and her shoes untied. Emmett knelt and tied them. He never rushed her. They walked 6 blocks to Buckman Elementary. The church bells across 16th Avenue rang the quarter hour as they passed. Hazel waved at the crossing guard by name. Emmett walked home with his hands in his pockets and didn't check his phone. The envelope was taped to his door for the 3rd time that month. He read it standing in the hallway. Notice of final eviction. The cited violation was a balcony window seal out of code. Emmett had drawn those windows himself in 2010. He had specified the seal to Portland's 2011 fire code, 2 revisions ahead of the requirement. He folded the notice, put it in his back pocket, and made lunch. At 4 in the afternoon, the buzzer rang. Sterling Cole stood in the lobby with 2 deputies and a KGW field crew. Cole smiled at the camera, gave a rehearsed line about the difficult balance of maintaining aging housing stock, and gestured for the officers to proceed. He looked up at the 4th-floor window once, and did not smile again. Emmett met them at his door. He did not raise his voice. He asked for 5 minutes to walk to the school and bring his daughter home. The deputy nodded. He came back with Hazel. She was carrying the flower book. Emmett crouched in the hallway to retie a lace that had come loose on the walk. He spoke to her the way he spoke on any ordinary evening. The camera stayed close. That was the shot that went out live on KGW at 6:11. On the 27th floor of Fox Tower, Camille Ashford watched it happen without moving. She was not a woman who froze. She had run the trust for 4 years, closed a 9-figure acquisition in Seattle at 33, sat through the reading of her father's will without shifting her posture. She froze now. She opened the laptop on her desk and typed the address into the internal system. Owner of record, Ashford Trust, Heritage Portfolio. Direct property manager, Sterling Cole. She dialed her assistant. Her voice did not lift or lower. Cancel everything after 8. Bring the car around. The car pulled out of the Fox Tower garage at 7:02. Camille sat in the back seat and did not open her phone. The city moved past the window in stripes of rain and neon. She did not know the name of the man on the television. She only knew the address, and she knew the address the way a person knows the shape of her own hand. She did not go to the building that night. She went to the archive. The archive was 3 floors underground in Fox Tower, held every original blueprint her father had ever paid for, and had not been opened in the 11 weeks since her last audit. The keycard reader clicked once, and the door swung inward. She walked past the first 4 rows without looking at anything. She was looking for the folder marked 214. Drawer 37 contained the restoration plans from 2010 to 2012. Camille pulled the top sheet out and rolled it across the reading table. It was almost 2 meters long. The paper crackled under fluorescent light. She flattened the corners with steel weights. The lower right-hand corner carried a signature in fine black ink. E. Doyle, Principal Architect. Beside it, in her father's handwriting, one line, "Doyle kept the soul of the building, not replaceable." Camille stood very still. She read the note twice. Then she opened the lease directory on her laptop and searched for the name. Apartment 4B, 214 Southwest Alder, signed by Emmett Doyle, in January of 2012. The construction had ended 8 weeks before that date. He had moved into the building he had drawn. She scrolled to the field marked addendum. The document had been logged in the system in November of 2011, and then Mark terminated in September of 2019. The name authorizing the termination was Sterling Cole. Camille sat down for the first time since the newsroom footage. She picked up her phone at 9:40 and called her personal attorney, not the corporate one, not Sterling's floor. "Marta," she said, "I need an internal investigation opened. Sterling Cole, everything he has signed since 2019, discreet. Start tonight." She stopped for gas at 11 and drove out to 82nd Avenue. The roadway inn was where Sterling had placed the family for the night, and Camille had traced the reservation before she left the garage. She parked between two pickup trucks. She stood outside room 118 and did not knock for almost a full minute. Emmett opened the door before she raised her hand. He was still in the shirt from the newscast. Behind him, on the far bed, Hazel was asleep with the flower book open on her chest. He recognized Camille from the photograph on the trust's annual report and did not say her name. Camille stayed in the hallway. She had not planned what to say. She said, "Mr. Doyle, I need you to know that I was not part of the decision today." Emmett looked at her for a long moment. "You are part of it now," he said. His voice was low, not sharp. He closed the door. Camille stood in front of the closed door for another 30 seconds. She heard the deadbolt slide. She walked back to the car and sat in the driver's seat with the keys in her lap. She dialed Marta again. "Add one more thing. 214 Southwest Alder. Full history. Original addendum. Every version. Whatever fire department report we have from a warehouse fire in July of 2020 in the Central East Side. Cross-reference the tenant list." She drove home along Burnside. The lights on the bridge blurred in the rain. She thought of her father's handwriting on the corner of the blueprint. Not replaceable. She thought of the way the man in the doorway had not asked her for anything. She had walked into rooms all her life where people asked her for something. She could not remember the last time a person had simply closed a door. At home, she did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen counter with the archive photograph she had taken on her phone and looked at the 4 black letters of the signature. "Doyle." She said the name aloud once, in the empty room, and turned off the light. The workshop in Selwood had a hand-painted sign above the door. Doyle and Daughter Woodworks. The morning was cold and gray. Camille arrived at 9:30 in a black car and stepped over a puddle to reach the entrance. Emmett was at the long bench, running a hand plane over a piece of white oak. He did not look up. The shop smelled of shellac and cold coffee, and the clean bite of fresh shavings. Hazel sat on a tall stool at the far end, arranging wood scraps into the outline of a small house. She looked up first. Camille had rehearsed this in the elevator. She had rehearsed it again in the car. Now she stood in the middle of the concrete floor with the folder in one hand and could hear the plane make a soft, even sound against the grain. "Mr. Doyle," Camille said, "your lease is valid. It always was. I have restored it. There are no conditions." Emmett took another pass with the plane. 3 long shavings curled off the board and dropped to the floor. He set the plane down and wiped his hands on a rag. "If there are no conditions," he said, "I still want it in writing. And I still pay the rent in full. Same amount." "Same amount." She put the folder on the workbench. He did not touch it. Hazel slid off her stool with a small piece of wood in her hand. It was shaped like a maple leaf, sanded on both sides. She walked the length of the shop and held it up to Camille without a word. Camille looked at Emmett. He was watching, but he did not stop his daughter. Camille bent down and took the leaf. She said, "Thank you." Hazel returned to her stool. Emmett spoke without turning. "She hasn't done that with anyone in 4 months." Camille closed her hand around the leaf. It was warm from the small palm that had held it. She said, "May I ask you something, Mr. Doyle?" "You may." "Why did you stay in a building you had already finished?" He was quiet for a long time. The plane sat on the bench. Outside, a truck went by on 13th Avenue and rattled the window. "Hannah stood on the 4th-floor balcony before the railings went up," he said. "She was in remission then. She told me she wanted to see the sunrise from that balcony one day. If she made it that far, she made it that far. She had 8 years in that apartment before the second diagnosis. Then a little more. Then she was gone. I stayed because she liked the light." Camille did not answer. She held the leaf. She said only, "Thank you for telling me." She walked out into the rain and sat in the car with the leaf in her palm. She looked at it for a minute and then folded her hand around it. She dialed her assistant. Get me Cyrus Dune, night maintenance, Ashford Building, in person, off calendar, not through Cole. That evening, Emmett and Hazel returned to apartment 4B. The hallway was quiet. Cyrus Dune stood at the end of the corridor with his hands folded behind his back, the way a man stands when he does not want to intrude. He nodded once at Emmett as they passed. Emmett nodded back. Neither of them spoke. Hazel unlocked the door with the key on her lanyard. She stepped inside first and stopped in the entryway with her flower book pressed against her chest. She looked at Emmett, then she smiled for the first time in 2 days. Emmett set down the 2 duffel bags and did not turn on the light for another minute. He let her stand there and look. The board meeting was called for 8 in the morning on Thursday. Sterling Cole walked in 5 minutes late with a folder half an inch thick. He set it down and opened it before Camille had finished her water. "Cammy," he said. Only Sterling still called her that. Reversing an eviction after every camera in the county saw it is a PR mistake we will price in shareholder equity. We should talk about the cost. He walked the board through his projections. A 4.2% quarterly revenue drop if the trust reinstated long-term leases in the Heritage portfolio at reduced rates. 3 of the 9 members nodded. Sterling looked at Camille across the length of the table. Your father would not have hesitated. Camille let the silence sit for a beat. Then she said, "Send me every code violation filed against 214 Southwest Alder for the last 24 months. Originals, not summaries. On mu desk bunun." Sterling paused. The pause was a quarter of a second. She saw it. He said, "Of course." The meeting adjourned at 9:08. Camille took the elevator down alone. She rode with her hand in her coat pocket and her fingers on the wooden leaf. At noon she went to the Ashford Building. She did not take the elevator. She walked up the east stairwell to the 4th floor and stopped in front of 4B without knocking. She kept walking up. The rooftop door was propped open with a brick. Emmett was on the roof. He was replacing the hinge on a rooftop access window, and he had paid for the hardware out of his own pocket. He did not look up. "You take the stairs," he said. "I do today." She stood beside him, but not too close. The wind pushed her hair against her face, and she did not fix it. Below them, downtown Portland lay in a wet gray sheet. The Willamette caught a flat piece of light. A gull crossed low over the parapet and turned east. Emmett spoke first, without looking up. "This hinge was original. 1928 iron. It has held for 4 generations of tenants. I am putting the same profile back in brass so the next 4 can have it too." Camille watched his hands. They moved the way a person's hands move when they have known a piece of metal for a long time. She said, "Sterling is pushing to reverse the reinstatement." Emmett tightened the last screw. He did not stand up. "So you came to warn me, or to ask me whether I can prove I have done nothing wrong?" Camille did not answer at once. When she did, her voice was quieter than before. "I came to ask you whether there is anything about this building my father knew that I do not." Emmett set the driver down. He looked at her for the first time. His eyes were the color of wet slate. "Your father came to he said. He drove down from Seattle on his own. He did not speak. He put his hand on my shoulder and he stood there for a half hour. That is what I know." Camille stood very still. The wind moved between them. She did not answer because she could not answer. She nodded once, thin and slow, and turned back to the stairwell. Halfway down between the 3rd and 2nd floor, she stopped. She put her palm flat against the wall. The plaster was cool. She stood like that for almost a minute, and then she kept walking down. In the lobby she passed Cyrus Dune, who was replacing a light bulb in the sconce by the mail slots. She said, "Mr. Dune." He said, "Miss Ashford." She did not stop. He watched her cross the marble. Camille drove back to the archive that night after Fox Tower had emptied. She took the top sheet of the restoration plans, rolled it into a wide fabric tube, and drove it herself in her own car to Southwest Alder. She did not call ahead. She knocked at 9:50 on the door of 4B. Emmett opened after 2 seconds. He saw the tube under her arm. He stepped aside. Hazel was asleep in the small back bedroom. The apartment was warm. There was a lamp on and a book face down on the sofa. Camille had never been inside a tenant's home in the Heritage portfolio. She realized this on the threshold and stepped in anyway. They unrolled the drawing on the kitchen table. It reached from one edge of the wood to the other. Emmett flattened it with 2 coffee mugs. He put his finger on the east column. Your father wanted the original brick left exposed here. I told him it wouldn't hold in a moderate seismic event. He asked me how long it would take to reinforce it from behind without touching the face. I said 6 weeks. He said, do it. Camille looked at her father's note in the margin. Doyle is right. 6 weeks. She traced the letters with the edge of one finger. The ink had bled slightly into the paper the way old ink does when a person leans on the pen too hard, and her father had always leaned too hard. He never showed me any of this, she said. It was the closest she had come to a private sentence in his hearing. He wouldn't have, Emmett said. He said he wanted you to find your own weight in the work. He said that with his elbows on this same table. Emmett kept his voice level. Hannah's first diagnosis came in the 3rd month of construction. Your father was the only person on the investment side who knew. He kept it. He offered me an indefinite lease on 4B without a term cap. He wrote it into an addendum, and he signed it himself in November of 2011. Sterling voided that addendum in September of 2019, 2 weeks after your father was first hospitalized. Camille laid her palm on the corner of the paper where her father's signature sat. Do you have a copy of the addendum? She said. I had the original in blue ink, Emmett said. It was in my archive at the Central East Side warehouse. There was a fire in the warehouse in July of 2020. It burned the same night Sterling called me and asked whether I had anything I needed to move into digital storage. Camille looked up. She understood. She said, I will find another copy. He did not answer. He rolled the drawing slowly and held it out. You take this. It belongs with your family. He took the tube. She stood in the doorway another beat. She said, It belongs to both of us, Mr. Doyle. She left without a goodbye. She was almost at the stairwell when she heard 4B click closed. She rode the elevator down alone this time. In the lobby, she paused, then walked out onto the sidewalk. It was raining lightly. She did not put up her hood. On Saturday morning, her personal phone rang at 9:02. The number was unlisted. Miss Ashford, the voice said. This is Cyrus Dune. I have something you need to see. Not by email. 6 o'clock this evening. Belmont Station on Belmont and 33rd, she said. I will be there, he said. Thank you. He hung up. Camille stood in her kitchen for a long time after the call ended. She looked down at the wooden leaf, which had been in her coat pocket since Selwood, and which she had transferred to the counter each night without thinking about it. Belmont Station was mostly empty on Saturday at 6. Cyrus Dune sat in the corner booth with a mug of black coffee and a black moleskin notebook and a manila envelope. He was 68. He had worked for Ashford since 1998, first at the Yamhill property, then at Alder Street from the day the restoration finished. Camille sat down across from him. He opened the notebook without preamble. 2 years of daily entries, in narrow handwriting. Column 1, unit number. Column 2, tenant name. Column 3, the violation listed on the eviction filing. Column 4, one word. Actual. In every entry, column 4 contradicted column 3. Rot where there was no rot. Bad wiring where the wiring had passed inspection 8 months earlier. Fire code where the seal was fresh. 17 long-term tenants across 3 Ashford Heritage buildings, evicted in 24 months under violations that did not exist. Each unit turned over within 3 weeks, all routed to a short-term luxury rental company registered with the Oregon Secretary of State under the name Alder Peak Hospitality. Sole owner of record, S. Cole. Cyrus opened the envelope. Inside was a blue ink original of the addendum to Emmett Doyle's lease, signed by Camille's father, dated November of 2011. She had thought the original had burned. Her father had given a copy to Cyrus in 2018, when he first began to suspect Sterling. Cyrus had kept it in a fireproof lockbox in his sister's basement in Beaverton. Cyrus said, Your father told me to hold it until you were ready. I didn't know when ready was going to be, but when you walked up the east stairwell yesterday, I decided it was time. Camille turned the addendum in her hands. Her father's signature was crisp. The terms were exactly what Emmett had described. Fixed rent, no expiration, termination only at the tenant's initiative. She turned back to the notebook. She read the entry dated March 12th of the current year, out loud at a whisper. Cole asked me if Doyle had recognized him from Boston 2008. I said I didn't know. Cole said, Good, better for both of us. She looked up. What is Boston 2008? Cyrus took a sip of coffee. Doyle was 24. junior on a mid-rise. He refused to sign a wall certification he believed was falsified. The project manager pressured him. He wouldn't sign. The project manager pushed the pour anyway, off Doyle's initial drawings but not his sign-off, and the wall failed at the base during the second-story pour. A concrete worker died. Doyle testified at the hearing. The project manager was named in the report but not charged. The project manager changed his name from Stephen Cole to Sterling Cole and moved west. Your father hired him in 2015 without knowing. Doyle did not know Sterling was on the property until they crossed paths in the lobby in 2018. Camille closed the notebook. She sat very still for 30 seconds. Then she opened her phone and called Marta. Special board meeting. Monday, 8 in the morning. Bring in the independent auditor. Bring in FBI Portland field office, corporate investigations, everything. I have documents. She hung up. She looked across the booth at Cyrus. She did not say thank you. She placed her hand on his for 1 second. He nodded. Neither of them spoke. She paid for both coffees and walked out into the last of the evening light. She drove east across the river and turned onto Alder. She did not stop. She only slowed. She looked up at the fourth-floor window as she passed. Emmett was standing at the kitchen sink, drying a plate. He did not see her. She did not honk. She drove on. The board reconvened at 8 sharp on Monday. The room was full. 9 board members, 2 independent auditors, 2 attorneys from the SEC compliance office. Marta at Camille's right hand. At the back of the room, in a plain gray jacket, sat Cyrus Dune. Sterling did not know Cyrus had been invited until he walked in. Camille did not open with a preamble. She turned on the projector. The first slide was the addendum, blue ink, dated November of 2011, signed by her father. The room read it in silence. Sterling kept his face still, but his index finger tightened on the barrel of his pen. Camille said, "This document was the first thing I should have been shown when I assumed this role. It was voided in September of 2019, without board authorization, by the current chief operating officer." She advanced the slide. The 17 evictions, unit numbers, names, cited violations, actual condition, timeline of turnover, Alder Peak Hospitality registration, ownership, Sterling Cole. The auditor confirmed the cash trace, $3.4 million routed through 6 accounts over 24 months. Sterling stood. His voice was calm. "Miss Ashford, these are allegations based on an unverified source. I would like the source of the maintenance log placed on the record." Cyrus stood at the back. He did not raise his voice. "Mr. Cole, my name is Cyrus Dune. I have been in that building since 1998. I inspected 37 of the violations you signed. None of them existed. I have the photos. I have the dates. I have the signatures of your approval. I was here before you arrived, Mr. Cole. I will be here after you leave." Sterling did not sit down again. He said, "Cammy, you are aware of what this will do to the quarter." She did not look at him. She looked at the board. Motion to remove Sterling Cole from the position of Chief Operating Officer of Ashford Trust, effective immediately. Motion to refer all files to the FBI Portland field office. Motion to reinstate leases for tenants displaced under fabricated violations. The vote was 8-1. The abstention was the board member Sterling had personally recommended in 2021. Sterling left the room with 2 members of building security beside him. He did not look at Camille as he passed. Camille did not look at him either. At 3 that afternoon, 2 FBI agents entered the lobby at 214 Southwest Alder to collect physical files. Emmett was on the 3rd floor, changing a handle on a fire door that had never latched right. One of the agents stopped. "Mr. Doyle." "Yes. We may need a statement from you regarding Boston in 2008. Emmett set down his screwdriver. He wiped his hands on his jeans. "I have been waiting 18 years for that question," he said. He signed the form. The agents thanked him and moved on. Emmett stood in the 3rd-floor hallway for a moment after they had gone. He put his hand flat on the wall, the way Camille had done between the 2nd and 3rd floors 2 days earlier. Neither of them had told the other about that habit. Both of them had it. He walked down to 4B and did not tell Hazel about the FBI. He did not tell her about Sterling either. He would tell her later, when she was old enough to hear it without carrying it. That evening he peeled 2 apples for her while she did her spelling homework at the kitchen table. That evening Hazel made grilled cheese with the cast iron pan that had belonged to Hannah. Emmett sat at the small kitchen table and watched the light change on the east wall. There was a knock at the door. 2 soft taps. Emmett opened. Camille was in the hallway. She was not carrying anything. She said, "May I come in?" He stepped aside. Hazel looked up from the pan and smiled without stopping. She reached for a 3rd slice of bread without being asked. Emmett did not stop her. The kitchen smelled of butter and something warm and quiet. Camille sat in the chair Hazel had pulled out for her, across from Emmett. She had never sat at that table. She did not have a script for how a woman sat at that table. Hazel cut a 2nd slice of cheddar and laid it on the pan. Nobody spoke. The sandwich came to her plate on a chipped white saucer. Camille picked it up with both hands, the way one held something borrowed. She ate slowly. Outside on Alder Street, the sodium lamps clicked on, one at a time, from 6th Avenue to Broadway. Emmett said, "Your father sat at this table once, November of 2013. Grilled cheese." Camille looked at the wood grain of the table. She kept her eyes on it. "Did he say anything?" He said, "I hope one day my daughter will understand why I kept this building." Camille did not cry. She set the sandwich down for a beat. She picked it up again and kept eating. Emmett did not press. Her eyes moved slowly around the kitchen the way they had never been allowed to move in her father's houses. There was a row of small pencil marks on the frame of the door into the hall. Each mark had a number beside it in Hazel's careful print. Age 6, age 7, age 8. 2 of the marks had a small dot in Emmett's larger hand, the ones Hazel had insisted she was taller than she was. On the wall by the window there was a photograph in a plain black frame. A woman in a summer dress on the 4th-floor balcony with the railings only half installed. She was laughing. Behind her, the sky was clear. Camille did not need to be told who it was. She did not ask. Hazel stood up quietly. She went to the back bedroom. She came back with the flower book and set it in front of Camille. She turned to the last page. The last page had never been pressed. It was blank. She looked up. "Mom said the last page was for the person you meet later," Hazel said. Camille took the book. Her hand was steady. She looked across the table at Emmett. He did not object. He rested his hand on the top of Hazel's head for a second, a small gesture, and he nodded at Camille one time. Emmett stood, opened a low cabinet by the stove, and took out a small wooden box. He set it on the table between them without opening it. The lid was smooth walnut, worn on one corner where a thumb had once rested. "This was my working notebook during the restoration," he said. Hannah wrote in the margins on the days she came to the site. "I have not opened it in 11 years. Camille looked at the box. "You do not need to open it now." "I know." He left it on the table. She did not touch it. She understood that she was being trusted with its presence, not its contents. Camille left at 9. At the door, Emmett said, "Thank you for tonight." "Do not thank me," Camille said. "I only returned what should have been yours from the start." She walked 3 steps down the hallway. Then she turned back. Her voice was smaller. "I could come by on Sunday, if that would not be an intrusion. We usually eat at 6. The door closed. On the ground floor, Cyrus was polishing the handrail by the mailboxes. He did not look up. He said, "Good night, Miss Ashford." "Good night, Mr. Doone." It was the first time in 7 years she had called him Mr. Outside the building, she stood on the sidewalk longer than she meant to. The window on the 4th floor was warm and yellow. She looked up once, then walked to her car half a block down. The wooden leaf was still in her coat pocket. The flower book was in her satchel. She did not turn on the radio the whole drive home. 3 weeks later, Sterling Cole was indicted on 5 federal counts: wire fraud, document falsification, conspiracy. He was booked into Multnomah County. Alder Peak Hospitality's assets were frozen. 7 of the 17 tenants displaced under false violations received formal letters of reinstatement. 3 of them accepted. Camille announced a reform of the leasing policy for the entire Heritage portfolio. Long-term leases prioritized. No eviction on a code citation without an independent engineer's report. A $1 million relocation fund for households already affected. She signed the policy with her father's pen. The board approved it unanimously. The abstaining vote from the last meeting was not present. The Portland Business Journal ran a long profile. Camille Ashford, Why I Am Changing How We Own. The photograph on page 1 showed her standing in the lobby at 214 Southwest Alder. She was not smiling. Her hand was resting on a reinforced brick column on the east wall. No one who looked at the photograph knew what the column meant. 2 people did. Cyrus Doone was promoted to head of heritage operations. His pay doubled. He refused the corner office on the 27th floor. He asked to keep 2 night shifts a week. He said the building talked to him at night, and he did not want to lose the conversation. Of the 3 returning tenants, one was an 80-year-old retired bus driver who had lived on the 2nd floor since 2002. He came back with 2 cardboard boxes and a folding chair, and stood in the lobby for a long time before he took the elevator up. Cyrus carried the chair for him. Neither of them said anything about what the year had cost. Emmett Doyle reopened his firm under its original name, Doyle Architecture and Restoration. The first commission came from the Portland Historic Preservation Bureau. The second came from Ashford Trust, drawn up by Camille's outside counsel, without her at the table, to avoid any question of conflict. He signed. He did not send Camille a copy. She did not ask for one. On the 4th Sunday after the board meeting, Camille arrived at 4B at 6 o'clock. She was carrying a folded linen tablecloth. It had belonged to her mother, and it had been in a drawer for 20 years. She did not explain. She laid it on the small kitchen table, and Hazel helped her smooth the corners. Emmett cooked salmon. Nobody spoke about Sterling. Nobody spoke about the television. The evening sun crossed the east wall and touched the brick column 2 floors below them without any of them seeing it. At the end of the night, Camille washed one dish. Emmett washed the other. Hazel dried. It was an old rhythm they made new by not commenting on it. At the door, Camille said, "Same time next Sunday." Emmett said, "Same time." She went home. That week, Portland had its first hard frost. Cyrus lit the pilot lights on the boilers in all 3 buildings and left the 3rd-floor window in 4B cracked half an inch, the way Emmett had asked, so the radiator could breathe. In her office on the 27th floor, Camille kept the wooden maple leaf on the corner of her desk. She had never told anyone what it was. She looked at it once each morning before she opened her calendar. Nobody who came into her office asked. She began working from the ground floor of the Ashford building 3 days a week. It was quieter down there. 6 months later, early May, the dogwoods along southeast Belmont were open. Portland was warm for the first time. On Saturday afternoon, Emmett was replacing the last hinge on the east balcony door of 4B. It was the hinge he had installed in 2011. It had lasted 15 years. He was replacing it with the same brass model. Hazel sat on a low chair a few feet away, reading. She was 9 now. She read quietly. Cyrus passed in the hallway. He tapped the doorframe once, a small hello, and kept walking. Camille came up the stairs with 2 mugs of tea. She had not knocked at the ground floor door in months. She had a key. She used it. She set one mug down on the small table by Hazel's chair and handed the other to Emmett. She did not step onto the balcony. She stayed in the doorway. He looked at her once, then said quietly, "Hannah said this balcony was for standing on, not for walking through." Camille took one step out. They stood next to each other, not close and not far. Portland lay below them. The Willamette to the left. The Hawthorne Bridge. The low roofs of the east side. Emmett did not look at her. Camille did not look at him. She said, "My father was right." About what? Camille did not answer at once. She laid her hand on the wrought iron railing. It was the railing he had drawn himself, 15 years ago, at a drafting table in a rented studio in the Pearl District. He recognized the way she was holding it. He had watched Hannah hold it the same way, once, in the fall of 2012, with the same slow palm settled on the same cast curve. He did not say so. He only shifted his weight a little, so that his shoulder was closer to hers by an inch and no more. A crow called from the roof of the building across the street. Somewhere below, a bicycle bell rang twice. Hazel came out behind them with her flower book. She turned it to the last page. The last page had a small pressed dogwood blossom now, white, taped in place. She lifted it and offered it to Camille. Camille took the book. Her hand shook a little. Emmett watched and did not speak. The sun touched the roofline of the buildings to the east. Light moved across the 3 of them, across the new hinge, across the old railing, down through the window into the kitchen, where the linen tablecloth was folded on the back of a chair. Camille stayed on the balcony a long time. She did not thank him. He did not invite her to stay, but she stayed. Downstairs, Cyrus turned off the ground floor hallway lights the way he did every evening. He smiled once to himself in the dim lobby, checked the front lock, and stepped outside. On the sidewalk, a young couple was passing with a stroller. Cyrus tipped his cap. They said, "Good evening." He said good evening back. He walked to his car with his hands in his coat pockets. Above him, on the fourth-floor balcony, 3 people stood in the last of the light. None of the 3 had been looking for anything, but something had stayed.